Welcome, everyone. It's February. Scott and I are on today again, and I have the topic, and I heard the term loss aversion in another context, and it got me thinking, which is what I'm a very curious person, and it got me thinking. I wonder how this relates, you know, not just within the context of what was being shared, but also in the world of addiction and betrayal trauma. So I did some research, and I've got some information to share with you, and then I have my thoughts on how this can apply within. In fact, I actually did some research on how it applies in addiction too. So loss aversion, what is it? It's a cognitive bias where the emotional impact of loss is felt more intensely than the joy of an equivalent gain. One of the examples they used, I moved it to $20. It was $10. I was like, oh, that feels out of date. But it's like if you find a $10 bill or a $20 bill, you go, oh, that's nice. But if you lose, a $20 bill, there's this the overwhelming disappointment of the loss is far greater than the joy of having found a $20 bill. So this is the pain of loss outweighs the perceived benefits of acquiring the same amount. This is applied to money, time, social status, sentimental possessions, or even opportunities. So I did research. According to the research, the torment of loss, and I put that in quotes because that's what they're calling it, the torment of loss, can be psychologically twice as powerful as the equivalent gain. This discrepancy often motivates the choices we make, leading us to cling to what we already have rather than acquire new objects, opportunities, etc. We perceive it as better to not lose that $20 bill than to find a $20 bill. So, this tendency to avoid incurred loss can prevent us from taking well calculated risks with potential worthwhile returns. And I put that all in bold because in addiction, we don't always do well calculated risks. So I wanted to make sure that we're looking at this as, we've done our thinking and research on it, and they can be well calculated risks. So how this can show up financially, we're less likely to buy a stock if there is a risk of losing money, even though the reward potential is higher. Loss aversion bias grows stronger as the stakes of choice grow higher. We may hold on to failing investments or avoid potentially lucrative opportunities due to fear of failure. And this can cause prioritizing short-term security over long-term financial growth, which can backfire down the road. This is also called myopic loss aversion. So there's a lot of terms in here I found. But I was like, and I thought of like a whole bunch of examples of this, of like, oh, I'm going to hold on to this because this feels secure. Feels secure. That's the whole, but there is a risk, but a greater possible gain. Social interactions. This bias can cause us to focus on preserving old relationships, even if these individuals are no longer bringing us joy that they once did. Fear of missing out or regret aversion. We tend to do things with a primary goal of avoiding later disappointment, of having not done them. Like I don't want to. One of the examples they were using was like, I have a big meeting tomorrow. I really need to get a good night's sleep. I need to be prepared. But my friends call last minute and want me to go out. And my fear of missing out makes me go do that versus being well prepared for my meeting, which is really important tomorrow morning. So that fear of missing out, uh, can can be a factor. So we tend to do things for the primary goal of avoiding later disappointment. We may choose to participate in something or not miss out, even if it is not in our overall best interest. And I wondered about this as a factor of not telling friends about, when now turning it to addiction and betrayal trauma. We don't want to tell our friends, and we always say, be cautious with who you tell. But we wonder about like, will we lose the friend if we tell them what's really going on with us? So then another area to consider, career. Anxiety surrounding the losing the security of a current job can outweigh the potential benefits of pursuing new opportunities, even when they could lead to greater satisfaction or growth. will stay in a job rather than risk going to a new job that has potentially more pay, position, satisfaction, growth. And the longer a person stays, the stronger the bias can become. They have experience, connections, and benefits that they fear they can lose. So it can be a self reinforcing cycle of loss traps. Though avoiding danger is important, this mentality might prevent us from implementing innovative solutions or seek opportunities that are ultimately more fulfilling. They went into it like with the Zika virus, or the Zika, whatever, Brazil didn't care as much about avoiding risks, and they found a solution like killing off the male mosquitoes or what. I mean, I was like, oh, that's really innovative. So there was they were not risk aversive or loss aversive. They were willing to do that. There are so many examples, but they said, you know, where this really applies: marketing schemes and insurance. With insurance policies, oh, you could, your house could burn down. Well, we all want, to have some insurance. But like that fear of like, oh, marketing schemes, oh, we don't want to miss out, or you really need this, or whatever. That can really be, I don't want to have that loss. So I'm aversive to that. So then, it was why it happens. Our brains. The amygdala processes fear. Loss aversion activates the amygdala. Our bodies also release hormones. Both our body and our brain are automatically programmed to be scared of loss. Another area in the brain, the striatum, predicts errors and anticipates events. Though it shows activity with losses and equivalent gains, it lights up more for losses. This is an unbalanced reaction and motivates us to avoid losses rather than seek gains. Another area of the brain, the insula, reacts to disgust, and working with the amygdala encourages us to avoid certain types of behaviors. This lights up when responding to loss. The higher the prospect of loss, the more activated it is, becomes compared to the equivalent gain, which may explain why we can be repulsed by losing out. So, socioeconomic factors, a complex combination of personal and environmental socioeconomic traits, determines our willingness to make decisions under risk. Culturally, there can be a difference between a collectivist and an individualist culture. So, cultures where everything is done for community, they are less likely to be affected by loss aversion because the impact is spread out over culture, versus where an individualistic culture, the impact is directly related to me and I'm absorbing all of it. So, why is this important? Many of the most important decisions an individual will face will require incurring potential losses in hopes of future gains. Although avoiding risky choices can be useful in many situations, it can discourage people from logically evaluating situations when fear of losing out is too intense. So, loss aversion prevents people from making the best decisions possible to avoid failure. In reality, the real failure may be missing out on opportunities such as accepting a new job offer or buying a new house that could improve our overall well being, even at the expense of a temporary loss. And here's what I found: how to avoid it. It's a natural human tendency that exists. So, how do we avoid it? It is essential to know how to avoid loss aversion to prevent it from influencing our decisions, especially when there are potential gains to be made. There's two main strategies. Framing. The first way is framing. The way a way that a transaction is framed can significantly influence an individual's perception of loss aversion. Phrasing a question as a loss may increase loss aversion, while phrasing the same question as a gain may reduce loss aversion, leading to a more calculated response. When proposing a transaction, try framing the options in a way that highlights the potential benefits that can be achieved rather than emphasizing the risks. Putting a loss in perspective. This is one I was like, I do this all the time. A simple way to tackle loss aversion is to ask ourselves, what's the worst outcome that could happen if the course of action was taken? Usually this helps us put loss and the strong associated feelings into perspective. This way we can get over our fears and better rationalize if it's worth making decisions under risk. And this I thought was interesting. Loss aversion and AI. The AI can help us avoid loss aversion in decisions. When we approach a dilemma, we evaluate our options with an overestimate of losses and an underestimate of gains. But a machine would neutralize that. So, and of course, we would not want to rely on AI for dictating every decision we make. But it can be a useful tool when we feel loss aversion could be clouding our judgments. So, why I picked this? Because I was really curious. How does loss aversion affect affect addiction, or how is addiction affected by loss aversion? My thinking was that addicts fear loss, fear the loss of using our addictions, and therefore do not seek recovery. But it's actually the opposite. There was a whole research on both behavioral and substance, and the study found that altered value-based decisions could facilitate early identification of those at risk to develop addictive behaviors and inform prevention efforts. But they say that the interventions targeting altered decision making alone could be insufficient for treating addictive behaviors. What they actually found was, because we are compulsive in our behaviors, we are less loss aversive. We are not thinking about those long-term consequences. So they did a study, and the study looked at delay aversion and delay discounting. They had to participants had to choose between smaller immediate rewards and larger delayed rewards, and then risk seeking for gains in the probability of discounting for gain tasks. They also did risk seeking for losses, and then loss aversion and mixed gambles task. There was it was like many pages. But there was a correlation with addiction and loss of aversion. Addicts less affected by loss aversion. We're not thinking about the long thing. There's nothing on betrayal trauma, but I was thinking of how often, when I'm talking to people, I hear the fear of a loss. You know, I don't want to lose this relationship, and they're not thinking, more gain focused. And so I suspect that this comes up often for betrayed partners. But it was really interesting to me to look at, addicts, of course they were not thinking of losses. We're not thinking of any of those longer term things. I was really looking at it as, I don't want to be losing out on my maladaptive coping mechanism. But that wasn't part of this research study, and it was interesting. But they were also looking at the correlation of, could they identify as an intervention modality to, if we identify people who are less loss aversive, would they be more likely to have the probability of addiction? So I thought that was interesting, that there it could be a possible piece of the puzzle in predicting addiction behavior at some point. So and then I went down a rabbit hole of fundamental attribution error and all that. I'll save that topic because this is a lot. But thoughts, Scott, on loss aversion?
Yeah, first of all, blog. You need
Oh,
to write a blog
I can do
um,
that.
because we
Yeah.
don't have anything on this. You know, I'll kind of start at the bottom of my list. You
Okay.
mentioned how betrayed partners have often a fear of loss of losing the relationship. Addicts, I see that with addicts too. Addicts also don't want to lose the relationship. Um, Now, I don't think either of us is implying that you need to get over your fear of loss and move on. Uh, we're not
Absolutely.
implying
This
that at
is just a
all.
factor.
But
Yeah, yeah.
right, but we don't always. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point. I love the idea of reframing losses or potential losses to gains and potential gains. And this bit about addicts being loss averse, I kind of, I mean, I agree with the studies, but I disagree in the sense that there's another way to look at it, which is um, addicts. We everything we let go of has claw marks all over it. we do not want to get sober. I was talking to a guy in our treatment center the other day, and he's like, he needs to give up drinking in addition to his sexual behaviors and drugs. And he's like, but how will I have any fun? How will I ever have any fun if I can't have a cocktail or two or three? If I can't get drunk once, if I can't party once in a while. And these are thoughts I have in early recovery. How am I ever going to have fun again? All I was focused on was what was being taken away from me, and that's how I viewed it. Everyone, the world is taking this away from me. Um, I'm a victim. So, in point of fact, and I'll ask you this question, Tammy. I mean, A, did you have those thoughts? And B, whatever it is you gave up as you got sober, did the gains you realized from it outweigh that?
So my hypothesis was exactly what you're talking about. The claw
Right.
marks. Absolutely, and that's what. So to me, the study was more about people, in active
Right.
addiction, and
Short-term losses, gains
yeah,
versus
yeah, yeah,
long-term losses,
yeah, yeah,
gains. We'll
yeah.
take the
Not,
short
not.
term every time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's exactly what I was thinking I would find. So it was interesting when I found the other, but I also took it in the context of this is people, in active addiction, not thinking of this,
Right.
but now we're at the point where there's a crisis. And, yeah, I was, but I think it's so interesting that we categorize, and this is universal, we categorize fun. Yeah, getting drunk is fun, and if we actually break all of that down, that, we're sloppy drunk and we say stupid things and we do stupid things. And if there's a video, we shudder, when like all of those things, you know, and, what I've come to know is the fun I was chasing was there had been a few fun moments, and I kept chasing that fun and never realizing that fun, I was just causing more chaos. But I was like hanging on, yeah, the claw marks, my fingernails are probably still stuck in that idea, you know. But now you talk about the gains. Absolutely. And I say this all the time. If I could wave a magic wand, which I don't have, and you could see how good recovery really is, yeah, like the claw marks would go away. We would go, oh my gosh, how silly of me to hang on to
I'll take
that.
it. Yeah.
Yes, yes, I'll take 12. I want that. I
Yeah.
want that bad, So, but it's really hard for an addict in addiction or at the precipice of like leaning into recovery to go, oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it sounds so boring. Oh, you're going to have, real connection and all that. If we're looking for this intensity stuff over here, you're telling me I have to give up that. That's my fun. It's not, it's a perception of fun. It isn't what real fun and joy and connection are. So,
Yeah. I wrote down two things. The first one was marshmallows.
oh,
There's an experiment that we do usually with little kids with marshmallows. And, we say, do you want one marshmallow now or two marshmallows in an hour? And if you did that with me, by the time you asked me the question, I would have already swallowed the marshmallow. That's this, I'm thinking short term. I want my short term gain, no short term loss. I'm not giving
yeah,
something up now for an hour
yeah.
from now.
And I'll try to
So
convince you in an hour you should give me another marshmallow. So,
yeah, or two. You promised me
yeah,
two. Like,
yes.
no, that's not what I said. That's what I heard.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the other thing I put down, and you just talked about, is holding on to a life that's miserable because I'm
Mm.
afraid of losing a life even when it's miserable. And I got to tell you, early recovery for me, I knew that my addiction was a disaster. My life had become a disaster. I was drowning in consequences. And I still didn't want to lose anything associated with that life, including the things that were causing problems. And, it's like, in retrospect, it was like, I should have lit that on fire and ran, but ran, run, I don't know, bad grammar in there somewhere. Yeah, but I couldn't wrap my head around that. I mean, it was a dumpster fire, and I was still determined to live in it. Um,
You're roasting marshmallows at the.
I was roasting my one marshmallow. because I
Yeah.
couldn't wait for two.
Yeah.
Um, so this is a cool topic, and I think it's very, very applicable to addicts. And I think it's applicable to everyone, but I also think it's as applicable to partners as addicts. But I mostly deal with addicts, and guys all the time they're like, yeah, but, and the yeah, but is like, you need to break up with your girlfriend because you're married, and they're like, yeah, but. I'm like, oh my God, you want two marshmallows and you want them right now, and you can only have one marshmallow. And you told us you want the marshmallow that you're married to. Not comparing any of you to marshmallows, please.
Yeah.
Please don't be
It's just part of
offended.
the analogy. You're not a marshmallow.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you,
Yeah. Yeah.
thank you. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from
Yeah. I know.
Ghostbusters.
I know.
So, but but they still don't want to let go of this thing that is ruining their life. It's ruining their family. It's costing them every penny. It's crazy, and they don't want to let go. It's like, ugh, if you could see how much better your life would be. And and it's interesting because and this, Tammy, we'll talk to them and we'll explain. This is what life can look like. Use ourselves as an example or whatever, and they get as soon as we're out of the room, they go right back to wanting the second marshmallow. It's like, ugh, it's gotta. I think you have to like realize over and over and over, and you make this tiny bit of progress, and eventually you get to the point where you can actually look at the scales, and it's tipping towards something healthier. But it took a couple of years for me to really be happily rid of the life I had had. I mean, was that your experience too?
I I had a gift of desperation. Like I knew I was on the I was clear I was going to die from my addiction. And so I think earlier for me, and I had the opportunity to go to, to a treatment program where they went, you don't have to keep doing this, like here's a path forward. And so I was able to latch onto that, and I really did. I leaned into that. And they also told me at treatment that if I don't make or if I don't make my recovery fun, I wasn't gonna last.
Yes.
That was a gift because I was intentional about finding the fun in recovery, and I did, and like it shifted everything pretty quickly for me. So I don't think I hung on to um I don't recall hanging on to, oh, I had so much fun back there. I think I had a pretty good awareness of like, oh, there were so many cringeworthy moments. And and I was in blackouts constantly. And so people would have to tell me, and I remember this telling my friend, okay, tell me a little bit more. Okay, that's enough. And then she'd have to tell me more about what I did the night before, and
Oh
I
yeah.
quit doing that. Like when in recovery, you know what? I haven't done any of those things. I don't have to hear the stories of what I did. I'm grateful.
Yeah. Um, I don't know if I've told you this story when I was in college. And by the way, if you have questions, type them into the
We would
Q&A.
like questions because we'll just keep
Yeah.
going. That's how
When I was in college, I was in a fraternity and we had this award. I won't tell you what we called the award because it's a not very nice name, but it was for the idiot of the week, basically. And if you won the idiot of the week award, you had to put this moose head on the wall in your room. And I think I was a junior, and it was like three-quarters of the way through the school year. And one of my friends came over, one of my female friends, and she looked up on the wall and said, "Where's your moose head?" It had been in my room the whole year. It's just like, what happened to your moose head? She thought it was mine. So, but I was hanging on. So, one other thing I wanted to say, and I can't remember. I got sidetracked by the moose head.
because you were still having fun doing all of those
I,
idiot
I was
things.
still having fun then, but the fun was ending already. Um, and I went on for another 15 years,
Mm.
more than that. Um, it, addiction, it's fun, and then it's fun with problems, and then it's fun with a little bit of fun with some real problems, and then it's just problems. And probably the last 10 years for me were just problems. Um, and I didn't want to let go of any of the life. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to change careers. I didn't want to, even though I needed to do all of that. I needed to get away from people, places, and things. And, you know, the career was changing and I didn't like it anymore, um, but it's how I pay for the things. Yeah, it's,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's that. So, but
uh,
I was thinking like the fun. I was like I have a hard time remembering a genuinely fun. Like I've got such good reality on it. It's like, well, there was that. For about an hour, it was fun, and then you did all those things that made it not fun.
right.
And so there were very few. I mean, I remember getting up and I like cars. I still like cars. But I had a nice car. And I remember getting up and going out, and because I didn't remember driving, like this is in the olden days, and the driving drunk laws are way more severe now. Thank goodness. But I remember going out and looking at my car. I had to walk away all the way around and make sure all the quarter panels are fine. Like I didn't remember,
Yeah.
like just like the insanity of all of that. So I'm pretty clear that yes, there were, I could walk into, the bars like I have arrived and yay,
Yay!
yeah, I know. And I, I was painfully shy. So that was like this persona I could put on. I loved it. I loved it. And then all of the other stuff that, that went around with it. So I
I
don't miss
remember,
it.
yeah, I remember the other thing I wanted to talk about because you had said your people told you you got to have fun in recovery. Um, and I'm 100% on board with that. I teach circle plans to guys in my online work groups, and circle plans are plans for sobriety for addicts. You know, you list your goals. This is why I'm doing recovery. I want to be the best version of myself. I want to be honest. I want to be trust. All that. And then you list your red circle, which is all of the problem behaviors. Red circle, red light, stop, don't do this. I'm not going to look at porn. I'm not going to, that stuff. Then there's yellow circle, which is slippery stuff. People, places, things, thoughts, feelings, things like that. And then green circle, which is healthy things. Um, and I always tell people, you need to put your, circle plan on your smartphone. I used to carry a printed out version in my wallet. And I carried it with me not because I couldn't remember my red circle, the problem behaviors, or the yellow circle. I knew when I was slippery. I couldn't remember the green circle. The green
Mm.
circle are the healthy things we can do instead of, acting out. And the green circle should pull, when you're in your yellow circle, when you're slippery, you could go either way. The green circle should have a pull. You should want to go to the green circle. So if the only thing in your green circle is call my therapist, go to my course online with Scott or Troy or Eddie or whoever's teaching, or go to the webinar and listen, or call my sponsor, go to a meeting, or clean the garage because guess what? You're going to be dull and resentful, and you're very likely to relapse. So I always make sure I'm like, yeah, but what are you going to do that's fun? I'll walk the dog. Okay, what are you going to do that's fun with other people? You know, you got to socialize. You got to have fun. What are the hobbies that 20 years ago you enjoyed? You'll probably enjoy them again if you pick it back up. And guys are like, oh, I play the guitar. I'm like, oh, that thing with an inch of dust on it behind you. When's the last time you tried? Well, before COVID. I'm like, you don't play the guitar. You own a dusty guitar. Um, so in recovery, we have to live a life. There's a passage in the AA Big Book, we are not a glum lot. And one of my mentors used to quote that all the time. And he was just reminding me, get off your ass and have some fun. Because if you don't, you're going to be miserable. And, why get sober? You were miserable in your addiction. Do you want to be miserable in sobriety too? The answer is no, at least for me. So,
Well,
but yeah,
I was young and single, and so I hung out with a young people's group of, and we socialized, and we lived in Michigan, cross country skiing. We went roller skating on Sunday nights after our 12 step group, because there was an adult skate. I did, it was like you say, the things that like the dusty guitar, but it was also what are things that I never did because I didn't, and cross country skiing was one of them. It's like, I was like, I want to go try this. I want to go explore that. So, and I find that so many addicts, are, you haven't done things. I remember, this was a few years ago, a guy that ended up coming to our treatment program, but his email address was about a certain activity. And I said, "Oh, you like to," and he said, "Well, I haven't done it in years." And I went, "Yeah, because your addiction has hijacked all of that." And so his email, it was that important to him. His email address was attached to this particular
Yeah.
activity. That was a healthy activity, and he's,
Yeah.
not doing it. And people have asked about, do your circles change? And yeah, it was an addict asking, and I was like, I'm sure you're asking about your inner circle, but I said, I certainly hope
Yeah.
so. I hope that outer circle
Yeah.
continues to grow as you find
Yeah.
more things. I love to paddleboard. I didn't know I liked to paddleboard. I like to hike. I like to do all of these things. And guess what? Those are all part of my outer circle. And my outer circle has continued to grow, and my life has continued to, gain more, more serenity, more acceptance, more joy because I found more things in my outer circle. So I love, and that's interesting that you forgot what was on the outer. So I can understand that, like when you're saying that,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I can understand that.
20 for
So
25 years, I had one coping mechanism,
mhm.
addiction. I forgot about picking up the phone and calling somebody and going to coffee or going to a ball game or seeing a movie or, just engaging in some self-care. That stuff was foreign to me. I've forgotten that that could be part of my life. Um,
But it changes. Okay, we have a
yeah.
question. So I'm the
Sure.
betrayed, separated out of the house because my husband is not working on recovery or even sobriety. He did have like 2 years that he was working on it, but he relapsed and stopped doing everything. When I bring up sobriety or recovery conversations, he goes into shame and says it's too much for him. And he has too much on his mind with work, depression, life. How can I make him understand that if he does recovery work and stops acting out, his life will become easier, not harder? You hear this all the time in your groups and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Sorry, I'm rereading the question. If you have an answer, go ahead. I'm rereading the question. Sorry.
well, so I'm going to pull because Sex Addiction 101 starts this week. I'm going to go pull the link for that.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I know how desperately you want them to see. Like, I always say the magic wand. You don't have one either. I don't either. And so this is at some point, he hasn't, I'm sorry you guys are separated. He has not had negative enough consequences to be willing to do that. And I hear the shame, and unfortunately not everybody gets recovery. I mean, that's the unfortunate thing. But he dabbled in it, because you said he sort of worked on it. So he's never gotten to experience the promises. We talk about the promises of 12 step coming true. You have to do the work. That means you have to do the steps. And it isn't just sitting in meetings and, dabbling around or whatever, warming a seat. It's if we choose to do the work that recovery work is, then we get the benefits. So it absolutely is what we put into it helps us gain traction in that. But just sitting around and going, oh, woe is me, I'm depressed, I'm too busy with work. I always say for addicts, we will find time when it comes to our addictions. We will find money for our addictions. But if, there's actually a quote in the big book, half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. At some point you go, here's where you are. You can either pick your active addiction or active recovery. There's no straddling the fence. You're either in active addiction or active recovery. There's no, well, I'm sort of, no. Okay. I'm
Um,
going to pull the link and put it
Thank
in
you.
chat.
Cool. Yeah, and I'd love to see him in the sex addiction work group. We also have a porn addiction work group if anybody's struggling with porn, starting in March. And if you're a chemsex addict, because probably some people tuned in thinking they were getting David today. These groups are still good for you. So feel free to sign up. I'm teaching both of the upcoming ones. Sometimes someone else teaches, but these are both me. I found what I was looking for in the question. How can I make him understand that if he does recovery work and stops acting out, his life will become easier, not harder? You can't make him understand anything. You can create an environment where he can see that if he chooses to. But betrayed partners cannot get well for an addict, no matter how much they want. You can't heal your addict. It's an inside job with recovery. I had to look, everybody on the planet was trying to help me. Nothing changed until I had a drink in my hand. I was at a Harvard alumni function, even though I'm not a Harvard alum. But one of my friends was, and I had an $11 drink in my hand, and this was a long time ago, so this was a very expensive
This I
drink.
was thinking. I was like, that was expensive because yeah,
Yeah,
I knew it was a long time ago.
it was in my hand, and it was a mudslide, which is like this sugary thing, and it was about 110 out here in Palm Springs. And it was in a hotel lobby that is now the lobby of a recovery center, which I find amusing because this was my last drink.
Yeah.
And I had a cocktail, and I thought, I can't live this way anymore. I'm killing myself. I'm killing my soul. And I had that thought, I am killing my soul. Everything that is me, I'm one sip away from it disappearing forever. And I put the drink
That's a
down,
boy.
and I drove to a meeting with half a cocktail in me, and vodka and Bailey's or whatever it is, a Kahlua on my breath. And I've been sober ever since. But that was, and somebody asked me, well, what changed? And I said, I did it for me. I didn't do it for my partner, which I didn't have. I didn't do it for my family. I didn't do it for, the courts or my boss I did it because I finally hit a point where I didn't want to live that way anymore. I was like, this is destroying me. And Tammy mentioned gift of desperation earlier. I think that was my like, oh, I have to change because I will die, if not physically, then emotionally. Um, I went to a meeting. I've been sober ever since, but nobody could make me understand that. I had to be standing in a bar with a drink in my hand and have a weird moment of clarity that sticks with me 20 plus years later, um, before I could get sober. So unfortunately, you can't make him do recovery. And if he doesn't want to do it, he's not going to. He'll check boxes maybe so he can, if he wants to get back in the house, but until he decides I'm miserable, I can't live this way anymore, he's going to, I started to say half-ass it, but I'll go with Tammy's half measures. That's
Mhm.
a nicer term, but it
It's in
means
the
the
big book.
same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, means the same thing. Half
Yeah.
measures in the big book, not the other one.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I feel your pain. I want to validate how miserable this must be for you, um, because you clearly want this relationship to work. This is a man that you obviously love, and he's not loving himself, and that's sad.
So a couple more things. I put the healthy boundaries for healing and empowerment for partners. Debbie McCrae is very good at helping identify what boundaries are. It's not punishment or control. It's absolutely, I need to take care of myself. And it is hard. And what Scott was saying and for partners to go, I can't keep watching. This is so painful to me to watch you continue, to go, downhill, and you can say, I care about you, but, so, that's could be helpful for you. Dr. Rob does a one-time 2-hour expert consultation for couples. He's very good at identifying the issues and guiding next steps. And guess what? Even with that, he has he can have the betraying partner go, oh, I don't like Dr. Rob. So externalize, I don't like Dr. Rob, and I feel sorry for myself rather than, gosh, I hear what he's saying and he's telling me that there's a way forward, so that I can do something different. But it is very validating for partners. I mean, yeah, by and large, partners are, this was really helpful, in clarifying. And guess what? Everybody gets to choose their path, so and even with your situation, you get to choose. Like, that's what your healthy boundaries are, is how do you take care of yourself when this person is not willing to take care of himself or the relationship. And so that's our job, is to take care of ourselves, because that's the only person we really do have any control over, is us, our actions and our reactions, no one else. So
Yeah, and sometimes an addict will listen to a professional like Rob and not their partner. Um, you know, and you know that stinks because partner, but sometimes, like having the credentials and being a forceful personality, which Rob is, will can open somebody's mind up a little bit. So you may want to try one of those actually. Um, but your husband's in denial. He's just got one excuse after another. Oh, there's too much on my mind. Oh, I'm too depressed. Oh, life is getting in the way. You know, really, you're not having a life right now, buddy. You know, but addicts don't want to see that. That this might be actually a loss aversion. There's something I don't want to give up, and so I got a million reasons to not give it up, even though it's making me miserable.
And how, go back to that. How many times have you heard with the guys in treatment or in your work groups or whatever? Oh, my wife has said that to me 100 times, and I
Yeah,
just couldn't. So yes, there is, some aspect of that, and and I'm with Scott that I think this person is making a lot of excuses. But it's the unwillingness to step into something different. So yeah, that would be loss aversion. I'm afraid of losing this, but he's losing you, like, you know
yeah,
uh, but denial is a really powerful thing. And so you had the
yeah.
moment of clarity, and with the drink. I Apparently, I have no recollection of this, when I was in the emergency room, was saying, I can't live like this anymore, I need help. Of course, the next morning I'm already going, wow, I learned my lesson. I won't do that again. Fortunately, my parents were smart enough. There was one person that they knew of in town, and they reached out to that person. That person was like, get her into treatment, and helped, pave that path. Because I was already going like, oh, I did not know, I would not have had coping mechanisms. I would not have been able, I know for sure. It would have been a really short, because I also had other things I was doing. Like, alcohol is one of them. I knew the alcohol was a problem, but all the drugs were recreational. All of the other stuff I was doing was, so I wouldn't have had clarity, kind of like you're talking about with the person. I don't want to give up the drinking because I'm going to hang on to that. Anything that we hang on to, keeps us from being, another 12-step thing, happy, joyous, and free. We are still going to be locked into, our addictive behaviors, and therefore miserable on some level, because we're not going to let ourselves experience the real joy and serenity and peace, which all sounds, so woo woo when you're like going, like, I got it. I'm just causing chaos in my life. How do I stop that? Other questions? We'd welcome other questions, other comments for Scott. I I have a whole nother topic, but I'm going to save that for another time. So, but yeah, because it was, like I said, I kept going down this. I was like, wow, this is just fascinating, but I will write a blog. I will send it to you. But yeah. So work groups, please, check those out. Those are psychoeducation. They're not therapy. They're not meant to replace therapy. We have many therapists that recommend them for clients because they are really helpful. And I mean, yeah, somebody will say something in one of Scott's groups, and somebody will go, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that." And and might never think about it, but also that shame reduction, like that person was sharing, there's shame. Guess what? It's shame reduction when you're sitting in a group of people and everybody's, looking to how do we stop doing these things, I'm not alone. Same for partners. I think it's really important for partners to have a space where it's like, there's other people who, are amazing, wonderful people who have been betrayed. It's not about you. It feels really personal. It's not, but to have the ability to get help and support. So do check out those. There is still an opportunity. It would be today, but the Betray Partner work group started last week on the 4th, so you'd have to do it pretty quickly. Email scott@seekingintegrity.com if you want help with that, but you could participate in that as well. So,
You can actually, if you sign up, you can sign up today on the seekingintegrity.com website. If you want to do that. As of tomorrow, that group will be
oh,
closed.
okay. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a
yeah. I
new way
keep
of
them
doing it. So
up on.
sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. Yeah, you used to not be able to do that, but the new system lets us do that. So anyway,
Well, there you go.
great topic, Tammy.
Thank you.
Please definitely
I
do
will.
a
I
blog.
wrote myself a post-it note. Yeah, I live by post-it notes. I have a post-it note. I promise I will. So, okay. I guess we'll see you next month. And any questions, reach out. We're happy to help. Thank you. Thanks, Scott. Bye.
Thanks.